it's very painful for me when I meet with college students, even high school students in the United States, in North America, in Europe, Jewish ones, who say, why do we need a Jewish state? We're all multicultural. The world is multicultural. The world is, what's the word I'm looking for, where everything is globalized.
Cosmopolitan.
Well, it's the globalization. Economically, politically, everything, we're all in it together. So why should there be this anachronism called the Jewish state? And that's why we have to explain it, because we're not all living in America. In America, there is at least a sense of being heterogeneous, and everybody has equal rights and multicultural. And although I still come here, and Christmas is a holiday and not Yom Kippur, and there are more stores sort of closed on Sunday than there are on the other days in the week. In Canada, there are a lot closed. So religion is part of other people's societies, but the idea that somehow the ideal is everybody a melting pot where everybody integrates and everybody's the same, and multiculturalism does contradict the idea of a Jewish state, but the Jewish state is not the exception. And people have to, trying to explain to young Jews why this state is so important, where we can have our own culture, our own society, we can survive in a world which does lead to assimilation, if not hostility, is still something extremely important, and we need to articulate that, and I don't think we're doing that enough. And that's why this is an important part of the agenda. It's not just because we want the Palestinians to recognize it, but we want our own children to recognize that this is essential to us, to our survival.
How do we address the absence of knowledge about Israel among young Jews? How do we make that target audience really care about what's going on in Israel?
I'm going to start by saying what we don't do is we don't rely on governments or somebody else to do it. This is something that every individual and every institution in the Jewish world has to do that. What you're doing in the New York Jewish Week is an example of that. Right On, and any of their program, whose name I don't remember, is, sorry?
Fresh Ink.
Fresh Ink, oh, thank you, okay. As one example out of many, a lot more initiatives that apply, that use the technology, if you're not on Twitter, social media, Facebook, using videos and other things, to bring in that generation into it in lots of different ways, and not to try to impose our narrative, our vision of the way things were 30 or 40 years ago on kids that can't identify to that. So it's got to be a broad effort. There are so many gaps in the knowledge. I do think that Birthright has a tremendous impact, and I see it all the time. Bringing kids, I met with a group of university students at Cornell University. What was interesting in the Birthright group, I'm an alumnus of Cornell, so I went with a couple of other people, 80 kids that were there. And almost none of them had any connection with Israel and very limited connection with Judaism before they came. They knew nothing. The fact that they were there, the amount of education you get just by going from place to place and learning about Masada and the Golan and seeing Jerusalem not as it's portrayed in the New York Times, or in sound bites, but experience it even for a couple of weeks has a tremendous, tremendous impact. I think that Birthright really is one of the great inventions, and we have to continue to be creative in thinking about ways of doing that. A lot more interaction between, it's not so much what do we teach our children in schools as how do we make the educational experience flow more naturally, both their Jewish connection and their Israel connection. So a lot more internships, and we see a lot of these. And every summer I have a group of interns. They intern at NGO Monitor, a couple of interns in Bar-Ilan in some projects. We do it very broadly. We got a Czech student who's coming next year at Bar-Ilan as got a scholarship through the foreign ministry. And so it's not just North Americans. You got to do it on a very broad basis to have that experience, to have that connection. So if you're an intern in an Israeli bank or an Israeli startup, or I know somebody who was an intern, whatever that may mean, in a beer factory, but you get hands-on experience of the Israeli reality, and I think that that's absolutely essential.